Okay, let's call this meeting to order. Board Secretary, you want to read the statement?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Good morning, board, staff, and members of the public. After my statement, the chairman will open this meeting and explain the rules for this electronic meeting. Please keep your microphone on mute when you are not speaking. The technical support team may proactively mute participants if the microphone is picking up background noise. Board members should check to make sure the microphone is not muted before speaking. You may text me at 540-336-3948 at any time during the meeting if you need technical support, and an IT tech will call your cell phone to assist. I now turn the meeting over to Committee Chairman Sultan.
In accordance with the governor's state of emergency declaration and executive orders regarding the COVID-19 pandemic, the Loudoun County Board of Supervisors Continuity Ordinance and General Assembly 2020 Budget Amendments 28 and 137, Loudoun Water will meet today in an electronic meeting. In compliance with these special procedures, only action items necessary to continue operations of Loudoun Water and the discharge of its lawful purposes, duties, and responsibilities will be discussed during today's meeting. Reports and other meeting information are available on board docs. Public notice and meeting access information was provided on the Loudoun Water website. A recording of the meeting will be available at this link, www.loudounwater.org/virtual-meeting-recordings. Board members wishing to speak are reminded to press unmute and identify themselves by name so that staff can accurately capture comments. All items will be recommended to the October 14th, 2021 board meeting. The board secretary will now take a roll call attendance of the committee members.
Thank you. Mr. Sultan? Mr. Bonfils?
Here.
Mr. Moody?
Here.
And Ms. Ursakar? Ms. Ursakar, are you on mute?
I am here, Joe.
Oh, there we go. Thank you. And I'd like to acknowledge that Mr. Koblis is on the call right now. Thank you.
Can I hear a motion to approve the meeting agenda?
Yeah, this is Keith. Motion to approve.
Jim, I'll second. Jim Bonfils, I'll second.
All right, Mr. Sultan?
Yes.
Mr. Bonfils?
Yes.
Mr. Moody?
Yes.
And Ms. Ursakar?
Yes.
Thank you.
The first action item is approval of selection of a Cmar contractor and award of a pre-construction services contract for Milestone Reservoir.
Morning, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Great. Okay, well, I am here today seeking approval of the contractor selection and award of pre-construction services contract for Quarry A. And there we go. So here's our agenda. We'll briefly touch on the background of the project and the team. We'll status our procurement, and then we'll talk about our path forward for this project. So this slide shows the Loudoun water supply system. I know we've seen this before and some of the slides that follow, but I always think it's important to kind of touch base on how the quarry fits into our overall water supply program and what the components of the project are. So just as a reminder, our raw water intake is located up here on the Potomac, and it pumps water 5 miles down to Trap Rock. Goose Creek Reservoir and Beaver Dam Reservoir are located south of Trap. And what will become Milestone Reservoir is located about 2.5 miles from our raw water intake. And Milestone Reservoir will be the latest in our planned additions to our water supply system. It'll provide us a wide spot in the line to bank water to be used for Loudoun Water customers in the event that there is an event on the Potomac. So here, just digging a little bit more, but here's a slide that shows the main components of our project. This is a conceptual configuration. It's one that we will be re-examining once our Cmar is on board. So the goal of the project is to convert the quarry into a drinking water reservoir and then tie that reservoir into our raw water transmission main. So we'll build a 36-inch fill line that'll be used to fill the quarry with water from the Potomac. Then we'll have a deep shaft pump station with 3 intake tunnels that'll be used to withdraw water from the quarry and send it to trap via 42-inch discharge line. The 3 intake tunnels will be located at varying depths throughout the water column. And then in order to facilitate crossing Goose Creek, we will have to put a tunnel under Goose Creek. So with approval of the Cmar selection and contract, our organizational structure will be as shown on our slide. We'll retain our designer, Arcadis and Schnabel, and we'll bring the Cmar on board as part of this contract. And then we hope to keep Black & Veatch on board as our professional advisor, and we'll talk about that in our next presentation. Black & Veatch and Arcadis and Schnabel have been really integral to our process, and they've provided some critical support to staff during the procurement process. We're all really excited to be transitioning to the next phase of work and to collaborate as a team on the design. So this slide, you guys have seen this before many times. This is just a slide that outlines the key requirements for the Vppa and loud and water policy when we move through a Cmar procurement process. Over the last 10 months, this is what we've been engaged in, and now we've reached the end. So we are done, and we're the last stages of completing this process. So what have we been doing since I was last here in May to give you an informational item? The evaluation committee has been quite busy. We reviewed and we ranked 3 proposals submitted by the shortlisted offers. We held interviews with each offer after we reviewed the proposals. This was a good opportunity for us to dig deeper into the proposals and to get to know each team a little bit better. And then using a set of criteria, scoring criteria based on a combination of project understanding, the pre-construction approach, approach to construction, the proposed project team, and project cost, the evaluation committee ranked the 3 offers based on their proposals and their interviews. Ultimately, the evaluation committee proceeded with negotiations with the 2 highest ranked offers, and the final selection was based on a best value and who the committee really felt best aligned with Loud and Water's project goals. So after spending the summer negotiating with MWH and Clark Construction was selected by the evaluation committee to move forward as the Cmar. The key differentiators for Clark were Clark's dedication of tunneling construction professionals to the project. In particular, there are a couple who have experience converting a quarry to a water supply reservoir. They also have a strong local presence and deep relationships with the local subcontractor market and labor force. They have extensive Cmar experience in Northern Virginia. And lastly, the committee just felt a sense that they fit better in the role as a construction partner on this team. So where do we go from here? We've reached the end of our procurement. Once the award has been made, we will transition into the design and construction phases of the project with the intention of completing the quarry conversion in 2025. So I will be back in 2023 seeking a construction contract award. Though as we move through pre-construction services, we may find opportunities to carve out smaller construction packages or what we call early work packages to bring forward sooner. So diving a bit more into the details on the next phases, this slide just outlines the project completion pathway. So we'll start with planning and early design, what we're calling pre-design, soon after NTP is issued. And through these early phases, we may identify early work packages that can be carved out and accelerated so they run parallel with the final design. Once the final design is complete, we'll move on to construction. So the work contained in this contract that we're discussing includes the pre-design and the final design phases, or what we collectively call pre-construction services. So what is included in this scope of work? The scope of work really follows the typical tasks that are included for the planning and design of a large project, but they're approached from a construction perspective. So as we move through the alternatives analysis and design, the CMAR will provide input on constructability, safety, risk, construction costs, and the construction schedule for each alternative that we consider and at each design milestone. So this means at the end of when we reach the end of the design phase, we'll have greater certainty on construction cost and schedule. We'll also have opportunities throughout pre-construction services to improve the schedule, to affect cost, and assign risk as appropriate with real-time input from our builder. In addition, the CMAR will also support the team by identifying long lead items that should be purchased prior to starting construction to improve the schedule. They'll also find opportunities for us to start construction on discrete components of the project early. And lastly, they'll support the project team on how the construction may impact our stakeholders and any regulatory considerations. So here's the negotiated budget. While this is the first CMAR project that we've done at Loudon Water and we don't have a lot of comparable projects, the negotiated fee is in line with the cost provided by the other offers for a similar scope as part of the proposal process. I guess I'll pause here for any questions.
Yes, hi, this is Keith Moody. Savita, you mentioned there was, alternatives and you had evaluation criteria for those alternatives. Could you go over those, some of the evaluation criteria again?
So the evaluation criteria was used for selecting the CMAR. It's not
Okay,
gonna, we will be developing separate evaluation criteria for the alternatives once we move into the design phase.
I see, okay.
Yeah, does that make
And when you're
sense?
yeah, it does. And when you're
Yep.
doing the evaluation criteria for the design phase, are you doing weighting on the evaluation criteria, or is it straight line equally across the board, or has that yet to be determined?
It's yet to be determined, but there likely will be some weighting factors. It's something that
Okay.
we'll determine as a team with the designer, with the CMAR, with our professional advisor.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Sultan?
Sir, I believe you're on mute.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Do you happen to know where they had experience converting a reservoir?
Yes, so one of Clark's subsidiaries is Atkinson, and they worked on the Atlanta quarry project. They did a
Huh.
quarry conversion project in Atlanta.
I have two other things. Do you have any idea as to when the board will be given updates? This is a pretty major project.
Sure. Yeah, that's
You
a
have
great question. So that's something that we have been discussing internally, and I think that's something that we can work with you to determine the right cadence for providing informational updates.
And one last thing, I think Mark is listening. Mark asked for some financial information. Is that forthcoming, or what's the story with that?
Sure, I do have a slide. If you can see it, I wasn't quite quite done with the presentation, but there's a slide here. It does
I'm sorry.
show, yeah, that's okay. It does show some preliminary information that we have. Obviously, as we work through the project, we'll be able to fill in this chart better as we get better information. But this chart is showing, the green highlighted box is showing the cost right now for our CMAR. And then it also shows the information for the professional advisor. And then at the bottom, it shows what we had allocated for the total project in our 2021 CIP.
Mark, does that answer your question? I don't think it does.
Hold on.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yep, can hear you now.
Yeah, okay. I was just trying to get a running total. I didn't really need to as much review it right now, but I just wanted to make sure that during this whole process that we show a running total and where we are towards our budget, et cetera, and what's been approved in the CIP. That's all. So if
Yeah.
there is a chart that's there, then that's fine. That's all I was looking for. And this is for both projects, just this one and the Broad Run project.
Absolutely.
Oh,
Alton, did you
okay.
want to say something?
Yeah, if I may, Mr. Koblis, Mr. Sultan, yeah, if you have a chance to take a look at this table, this is something that we put together and it will evolve. You know, we want to look to, you know, create a high level accounting where you can certainly track things as we progress through this, especially as there are, you know, multiple moving pieces to it. So Tom and I have talked, and it's something that we want to fine tune and get to the right level of reporting that you're looking for these two major projects going forward. And again, Tom Lipinski and I talked yesterday evening, and it was, you know, reminiscent of the reporting that we brought forth to the board, you know, throughout the Potomac Water Supply Program project, and want to look to borrow, you know, ideas from that as well. So, understood, and we look forward to continuing to fine tune this to make it a nice, concise place where you guys can track the overall of these you know, multiple large projects.
Hey, Alton, this is Mark again. If you could just make sure that we always have original budget on the plan so we can see where we started from and if we approved any extras, that would be great too. Thank you.
Sure. Absolutely.
Mr. Bonfils, did you have a question, sir?
Yes, yeah, I did, but I think we've already gone through it. The timeline seems to me to be even longer than building trap rock. I know it's a complicated project. It seems simple to just put water in a hole in the ground and then take it out. But it's it just seems like this is going to be quite some time before we even get to you know, another year and a half or two before we get to full construction. And I like the idea of the potentially doing some pre-construction preliminary projects. So I'll be anxious to get to receive the updates and, you know, help in any way I can to move the timeline forward.
Absolutely. Be happy to share that information with you as we move through it.
Thank you.
So if there are no other questions, then this is the motion that we have in front of you.
I'll
would
go
like
ahead
to-
and I was going to say I'll go ahead and make the recommended motion. Even though it's less than $1 million, so sometimes we put this on consent, I would recommend not putting it on consent.
I agree. I second the motion, and I think we should put it on an action item for the board.
Thank you.
Can we get a vote?
Yes, seeing no other questions. Mr. Sultan,
Yes.
Mr. Bonfils,
Yes.
Mr. Moody,
Yes.
and Ms. Ursakar.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, the next action item is Milestone Reservoir Professional Advisor Task Order for Pre-Construction Services.
Okay, so I'm here today asking for approval for a task order for Black & Veatch to serve as our professional advisor during pre-construction services. So here is our agenda, much shorter than the previous presentation since we've gone over most of the background information. But I do have our project team. So with the approval of this task order, we'll complete the organizational chart as shown. Since this is the first time that we're delivering a Cmar project, staff feels that it is important to keep Black & Veatch on board to continue to guide us through the next phase of this project. Throughout the procurement phase, Black & Veatch has really been an invaluable member of our team, providing timely advice and support as we navigated the uncharted waters of our first Cmar procurement. In addition, in discussions with other owners, they have confirmed that using a professional advisor as a first-time Cmar is a prudent approach to support staff. So this is the same slide that I just showed you in the previous presentation. I won't go through it again, but the current task order that we are discussing does include all of the work that will be needed to support staff through the pre-design and final design phases of this project. So drilling down into the details, again, like the Cmar task order, this task order does mimic what the typical tasks that are included in the planning and design of a large project. But in this case, there's an eye towards supporting staff with a third-party perspective. So as we move through the alternatives analysis and the design, the professional advisor will provide input on some of the similar items that the Cmar will: constructability, safety, and risk, for each of the design milestones and at each alternative that we consider. They'll also provide leadership in workshops and meetings to help facilitate the discussion between our designer, the Cmar, and staff. They'll provide administrative support in helping us manage the overall project and schedule, the risk register, and maintain records of decisions and comments. We'll also work with staff to create various dashboards that'll be used to track the progress of the project and cash flow management, and some communication tools that we'll be able to share with you. And this scope does include staff with both design and construction experience who can provide Loudon Water with independent assessments and really help represent Loudon Water's interests as we complete our design. So this is the negotiated task order budget, similar to the Cmar fee. Since this is the first time that we're doing a Cmar, we don't have direct comparisons with which to do an extensive analysis. We were able to compare some of the tasks to similar work that was done under the Potomac Water Supply Program, and the fees do line up quite well. And in addition, this does fall in line with the Cmar's fee as well. Are there any questions? Okay, I do have this same, this is the same table that I showed you in the previous presentation. The green highlighted box is just highlighting Black & Veatch's work. I was here about a year ago seeking a task order for procurement assistance. That was about $406,000. Through the early part of August, we've spent about $208,000 of that task order, and we will use some of the remaining funds to finish up the work and then transition into this new task order.
Ms. Sursakar has a question.
Yes, I do. So Savita, I just wanted to ask you, so is this, I think where I'm kind of confused is we're hiring a professional advisor for the first time?
No, we're a first-time Cmar, so we're
Right.
hiring an advisor to help us kind of work through that process. I couldn't tell you if this
Right.
is the first time we're hiring a professional advisor in general, but for this project, that's why we're hiring them. And they've been
Wait,
with
sorry,
us throughout.
I didn't catch that. So this is the first time we're using a Cmar, and we're hiring a professional advisor to offer support for this.
Correct. So Black & Veatch has been our professional advisor through the procurement phase. That is actually a requirement of the Vppa and our policy to have a professional advisor as we consider alternative delivery. And so we would like to continue their services through the pre-construction or the design phase to help advise us as well.
So I would really like to see the policy. Not that I doubted this is a great take on this, but I really would like to see the policy because it's going to give me a better understanding of what constitutes in the policy in terms of hiring a professional advisor.
Sure.
So I'm really going to request that documentation.
Okay, we can share that with you.
Thank you, Savita.
Ms. Sursakar, if I could, so we can certainly email it to you separately, but also if you go to board docs, I believe it's under policy. Jewel, correct me if I'm wrong, or library, one of the two. But it's within the board statement of policy is where you would find the. Is it in there, Savita, or is it in the procurement policy?
It's in the procurement policy.
Sorry,
Yeah.
sorry. Yeah, so that full document should be out there, but we can also email it to you as a separate PDF.
No, thank you, Carla. There's no need for that. If it's in the procurement policy, I will take a look at it. If I still can't find it, then I will reach out to you.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank
Would
you.
you also like us to share you the section of the Virginia Code where it's required as well?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Can do that
Thanks,
too.
Vppa. Thanks for
Sure.
bringing that to my attention. I forgot about that. Very important. And that's also on the board docs as well, because I don't want to give extra work to somebody out there if I'm able to find it myself.
Go ahead, Carla.
No, I don't believe that the Virginia Code itself would be out there. So we'll send that separately. It would just be our own procurement policy that references that code. But it would be helpful probably to have for you to have both. So we'll send that as a separate. So the policy itself you can find in board docs, but the code we'll send.
If the Virginia Code is in the procurement policy, which I believe, yes, it is, I will dig in and I will take a look at that.
Okay. Yeah, it's going to be, it will be referenced in there. But again, if you need any additional information, just let me or Savita know and we'll get you whatever you need.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
No problem.
Oops. Okay, so if there are no further questions, then this is the motion in front of you.
Mr. Sultan, I believe you may be muted, sir.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
This is a question more for the committee. Do you folks feel comfortable that you know the difference between Cmar and a conventional project? I think we've been through it, but I just want to make sure everybody understands it. No,
I don't know a
nothing.
conventional project. I do know Cmar.
Maybe we should mention what the difference between the two is, just so they know, but just so Ms. Sursakar knows.
Sure. So in a conventional project, I assume Mr. Sultan, you mean a design bid build project, correct?
Exactly.
Okay. So in a traditional project, and I would assume those are 90+% of the projects that we do, we do a design, then we finish that design, we put the project out to bid publicly, and then contractors bid on the project, and it's usually low cost selection unless there are some qualifications or other things that may come into play. But typically it's a low cost selection, and then we move forward. With a Cmar, there are requirements on the size of the project to be able to do a Cmar, but what you do is you have a designer, and then you also hire a contractor. In this case, this is the procurement that we've been through. It is not low cost, it is best value. And then that contractor comes on board as part of the team, and you work as a team together through the design. Once you reach the end of the design, the Cmar in Virginia is only allowed to self-perform 10% of the construction work, which means 90% of that work has to actually be bid to subcontractors. So the Cmar will do that, and they will put together their final price, what we're calling a contract price, and then they will present that to us, and then we will be able to negotiate with them before we bring that to the board.
That's a good explanation.
Okay.
Any questions?
Yeah, so very, very quickly. So the subcontractors, we're still not at that phase right now. And when we are, we will be notified about that, right?
Sure, yes. No, we won't be at that phase until we get towards the end of the design.
Yeah, right. That I
Yep.
know. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. I would really, really thoroughly like to understand the subcontractors that we go with, because in the past, I will just be explicit and say, in the past, I had to recuse myself from one of the projects because it was tied to, my own personal connection.
Sure.
So for that reason and for other reasons, it's always good to know. that if there's a subcontractor on board, and as opposed to just understanding that there's a subcontractor.
Yes, absolutely. We can share that with you once they're selected.
Thank you.
Okay, can we have a motion? Well,
This is Jim Bonfils. I'll make this motion.
I assume to go to the action.
Action item, please.
Yes, I second that motion. Could we have a vote?
Yes, Mr. Sultan,
Yes,
Mr. Bonfils,
Yes?
Mr. Moody,
Yes.
and Ms. Ursakar.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
the next action item is a professional services contract for phase 3.
Good morning. I'm Sarah Lothman. I'm the manager of capital design, and I'm joined this morning by Kendra Sviem, who is our director of water reclamation. We're here this morning to request authorization to award a professional services contract for our Broad Run Phase 3 expansion project. Back in June, we held a workshop with the board and talked through Loudon Water's kind of culture and approach for planning for some of these major challenges, of which there are no shortage of them at Broad Run as we look into the future. So we are very excited this morning to bring this item forward to you. So Kendra is going to take it from here. All right, so in our presentation today, I'm going to walk through the background, project drivers, and goals, and then I'll turn it back over to Sarah, and she will go through our procurement process in setting up the first portion of this contract. So at our workshop this summer, we went through, a lot of the background of what's going on at Broad Run and a lot of the really specific challenges. So to build off of the background that we've already started, we've got a visual here of how Broad Run existed. This aerial is about a year ago, so it's actually not reflecting a lot of the 16.5 expansion that's already happened within the last year. So we're showing the floodplain here in the background so that we can keep in mind how much of the site on the main campus that is available for construction. And the first phase that we show here in green, this was construction that happened in the first 15 years of the plant. And it's minor. We added the reclaimed water pump station and a couple more digesters, but really it was a lot of rehab to keep things functioning over the initial phases. So the 16.5 MGD expansion that we're in right now is our first big capacity increase. We're going from 11 to 16.5. So this is 50% that we were able to get by really just modifying in place and building a few new structures on the site. So we're about a year into that construction contract right now, 3 more years to go to get that complete capacity online. So phase 3 is our expansion beyond this point. And so if we reference from the master plan, everything in blue are the decisions of infrastructure that we have to make for phase 3. And just a scale of reference, we're looking at a lot more work. This is significant in the number of processes that we're going to be looking at, the size of the infrastructure that we're going to be building, and really also utilizing a lot of the available space that we have on the land. And so in gray, we also show what we've termed our long-term planning, but this is the space we're reserving for future regulatory changes, even more advanced treatment that we might be looking at already for the phase 3. And so the master plan also took us to a much longer level. So this space was identified and processes that might potentially go there so that we can say yes or no, there is enough space existing there. So if we just want to do a quick zoom out to see the entire main campus, and how much of that space that we're going to be considering for Broad Run, and really the small portion that would be left in the future, And this is going to be a big advancement in the growth of the plant and where we're going. So there's a lot of really complex work to be done, and we're going to be making some major decisions for the life of the facility. And we talked about it over the summer, but increasing treatment capacity is the primary goal of phase 3 and our really key timing driver. But because of regulatory changes and the specific site challenges that we got into for Broad Run, we have a couple other really key project goals in addition to just getting additional capacity online. And we really need to maximize our nutrient removal so that we're properly utilizing that waste load allocation that we have for the Chesapeake Bay. And then because our limits are going so low, we really have to achieve a cutting edge level of plant operations to make sure we can maintain compliance with those regulatory objectives. And in addition to these project goals, it just comes with a really unique set of challenges. So due to everything going on site, we have an amazing level of complexity, and then balancing the differences between timing and capacity and making sure that we can operate in the range that we need to. And then we also just have uncertainty in the projections of both what capacity might be required or where regulations might go in the next 10 years. So all of this is going together to really form how we structure this project. And so just to touch base on our key driver of getting increased capacity, this is the same graph that we discussed last time, and our green line is showing our monthly variation in total wastewater flow generated in the central service area. So this is going to include both our capacity that we have with DC Water and our capacity with Broad Run. But this window of projection that we're showing in flows is really saying that by 2030, we're going to need additional capacity beyond the 16.5 that we're currently building. And we've currently laid out a 10-year process. So we're going to do 2 years of planning, 3 years of design, and 5 years of construction to get that online, which really means we have to start now if we're going to be ready in that 2030 timeframe. But we've got our list of just key aspects of uncertainty that could affect really all of this plan and the timing that we will keep our eye on. And we have been, which is why we've really triggered this work, but it's going to be important to keep looking at those changes as we move forward to know if we need to speed up, slow down, maybe change course through this process. So we wanted this to be in your packet as a nice key takeaway, because this is what we're going to come back to multiple times throughout this process. And then our other drivers for other project goals are just the regulatory drivers of increased and lower nutrient limits that we discussed heavily this summer. So, we wanted to, similar to what...
Question.
Yes.
I have a question. Is there any chance of us getting additional capacity from DC Water?
So that is a really great question, and is something that we have pursued quite heavily as we look at what we call our tools for extending our current waste load allocation. And our capacity with DC Water is highly tied up into the interagency agreements that exist between DC Water, Loudoun Water, Fairfax County, and WSSC. And it was actually very timely in that DC Water initiated this past year modeling of the capacity and current flows going to the Potomac Interceptor that carries that down. So it would be very difficult just contractually to modify the agreements that we have in place, because to open it up for Loudoun Water would open it up for all the agencies. But in addition to that, the PI is actually currently over allocated with the allocation that each of these organizations currently has. So as that, the conveyance pipe just to get to DC Water exists, there is no extra capacity, and we're looking as a group at alternatives to just fit the water that's already been allocated into the PI better, and what key projects might be to continue to accommodate that. So while we do want to keep looking at methods that we can maximize that, getting additional allocation is very unlikely. So what we've been focusing on is we actually have a dry weather allocation and a peak wet weather allocation. And so we've been looking at strategies where we might be able to take more flow in and store it in our equalization during peak flows so that we can get longer term dry weather allocation. So really just maybe using more efficiently what we already have.
Oh, good. Interesting. Thank you.
And so what we're looking at here is what we currently envision as the possible structure for phase 3. And just like Savita went through in the quarry, as we go through some of this initial planning, this may change, but we do anticipate, and the contract that we're going to be discussing today is this initial task A, and this is in our 2-year planning phase, and it's really where we're going to say, well, how much capacity do we need? And what technologies are going to be required. And so it's hard to have any idea of what construction budgets are going to be or what those construction contracts might need to look like or their timing until we get task A accomplished. But we obviously have some ideas in our head already laid out. So what we're anticipating right now is we'll go through about 1.5 years in task A and making some very key decisions. And then we're going to stop and set up another contract to say, well, what kind of delivery packages and timing make the most sense? And stopping here also allow us to check in a couple of years down the road on where we are on some of those uncertainty factors to better evaluate timing. But we are anticipating needing a smaller interim construction package that can move a little faster to help us bridge the time in the late 2020s and early 2030s before we can get large increments of capacity online. So we have smaller interim design and construction, and then a larger, longer term to get maybe a full increment online. And so we definitely want to keep this figure going, and we'll continue to bring this back and show how we're modifying it as we make some decisions and adjustments along this path. So to dig a little further in what we're doing first, a key task is looking at the capacity increments. So we're going to take these flow projections and really dig into them a little further and make sure that we're monitoring, industrial growth, data center growth, residential, and coming up with what our projections might look like, uncertainty, safety factors in those, so that we can select the appropriate increment to really get us further in the future. Because one of our goals is to not have to continually design and construct back to back moving forward. We're going to be looking at the master plan, and we start from those technology evaluations and updating with changes with regulations. As we've seen, things with PFAS are moving very quickly, but we know there are other constituents of concerns that may also come up. So make sure that we're capturing those changes, as well as in the last 5 years, changes that have been made in technologies, because there's a lot of advancement going on in biosolids processing and more advanced nitrogen removal techniques. And then once we do this work, then the meat of selecting those processes and coming up with an integrated plan, because we have to be very careful to make sure that the biosolids technology we select is compatible with what we need from our mainstream liquids treatment. So they have to come together at the end with discrete integrated plans that all work together for selection. And as part of this, the part that I haven't been able to talk about is really that cutting edge level of operations. And so in traditional planning, we would anticipate that we were going to look at advanced liquids and solids technologies, but a piece of the work that we are moving forwards is really building and demonstrating how we're going to operate and meet these very low effluent limits. Because what we can't do is select a technology and assume that it can operate to meet those limits now and get there in 2030 and realize we don't have the tools we need to get there. So, and this is, I think, kind of the long-term story for Loudon Water is we have to innovate because of the requirements we have in front of us. So the innovation as a result of circumstance is something that comes up a lot here. But what we've brought forward in this initial task are what we're calling our Advanced Effluent Performance Verification. And that's a really pretty title for we're going to look at using machine learning, and we want to use this to start predicting operationally where the plant's going to go. You know, and if we, what we've got here is our first neural network map of how all the phosphorus data at the plant is related. And it makes sense that normal operation, we're looking at chemical dosing and how that affects effluent phosphorus. But if we're going to really lower that band and say our effluent phosphorus always has to be within, 0.02 milligrams per liter of each other, we need to know how everything within the plant. And as you can see, there's a lot of different points of data here that are affecting that one effluent constituent. And machine learning can help us get predictions on where that's going. So what we're going to do is bring forward those tools and actually put them in place at the plant now so that we can say, yes, this tool works. It gets us to the operational target we need to be, so we can confidently build more of this capacity and say, yes, we can meet those regulatory requirements in front of us. So it's very exciting, a whole new level of challenges. But once we get these tools in place, the exciting part is we can use them for the next 10 years before that capacity is even online to not only improve our effluent performance, but also make operations more efficient as we look at these predictions. So there's multiple benefits to bringing some of these tools ahead, as well as staff training and making sure that we can really rely on this as a new form of permit compliance, in addition to just relying on what maybe was more traditionally just paper planning, that yes, we can build this tank and it can meet a TN of 4, but we are not so confident that we can meet a TN of 2 with that. We really need to prove to ourselves. So that's the nuts and bolts of what's in what we're discussing right now. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Sarah to go into the procurement, but are there any questions about the technical aspects of the scope that we have right now?
Hi,
So Sakar has a question.
yeah, I do. So the innovation as a result of circumstances, I understand that. What are some of the circumstances do you think that we would encounter in terms of that innovation?
So the circumstances really driving that innovation have to do with our nutrient waste load allocation that we discussed over the summer, and the fact that that is pushing us beyond state of the art technology in both nitrogen and phosphorus removal. And we're currently working with DEQ, right, for a path forward to say, is there a way for us to get more waste load allocation so that we don't have to hit these very, very low nutrient removal levels? However, it is our due diligence to make sure that we can still get as far as physically possible with our technology. So that is really one example, but another great example is just PFAS, right? So the fact that PFAS has come up so quickly and the regulatory changes are bringing that as another thing that will eventually come down the line as a permit requirement. That is another circumstance that's going to force us to innovate on the solid side, because really there aren't systems out there right now designed for removing these PFAS from biosolids. So we're going to look at, well, what have people been testing and piloting, and how can we confidently phase these in? So what we're trying to demonstrate is that there are key aspects, right, driving us in this direction of having to look at some very advanced technologies. And then another one that may come up is microplastics, and where are those microplastics going to end up is another circumstance that may force us to look at more advanced technologies.
Sure, yeah. Are we hitting low levels of nutrients? Is that what is the scenario right now? I'm getting a situational awareness here and I appreciate your input greatly.
Absolutely. Sarah, do you want to just jump down to the slides in the bullpen? I have the nutrient concentration slides just for reference so that we can take a look at those. Oh, you're gonna have to just click through all of those.
I know. It's a little slow.
Yeah. So where we are right now is we are currently, so keep going. It should be right in this Keep going. Yeah. This is it.
Okay.
So right now, Broad Run has an effluent requirement of a total nitrogen of 4 and a total phosphorus of 0.1 milligrams per liter. So this total phosphorus effluent limit that we already have is lower than the regulatory state-of-the-art phosphorus of 0.18. So we have one of the lowest concentration limits right out there right now. And as we expand, since we're not getting any more waste load allocation, that just drives the concentration even lower. So our 16.5 MGD expansion is going to take that phosphorus, our equivalent concentration that we're going to have to reach, down to 0.06. So we don't know our increment of expansion for phase 3 yet, but it's likely going to be in the 22 to 30 is where we're going to go. So we're looking at phosphorus concentrations significantly below what is state of the art. Some of the lowest levels in the nation is what we're really looking at with this. So right now we're already at a very low level, but our continued need to expand the plant is forcing us down to even lower levels. So we've demonstrated this concern to the state in saying the state needs a pathway for us to just have to be able to get more waste load allocation to accommodate our growth. Loudon Water is just the first utility really broaching this issue since the Chesapeake Bay program was put in about 15 years ago. So we're going to have to lead the way as we normally do in getting some regulatory change, as well as pushing the envelope and where we think we can reach with our technologies. And so in terms of where we reasonably think we can design to for phase 3, we're going to be targeting this TN of 2 and the TP of 0.05 as our nutrient limit of where our technology should be able to get to.
Is there a detrimental effect right now in place if we don't take headway on this right away? What are some of the side effects or adversarial impacts that we're looking at?
So it is definitely not right away, right? So right now we're still in this. We have to expand the plant because otherwise there would be nowhere for the wastewater to go. So needing more capacity is what's making us have to say, well, can we reach this? So once we get a permit from DEQ saying that we have to reach these levels, well, then we would be in permit violation if we didn't reach those levels. And that's the detriment for Loudon Water. The environmental impact of this is just the nutrients going to the bay, right? And the epoxic zone in the bay and that type of environmental impact. But it's really a numbers game, right? In terms of DEQ managing Virginia's total waste load allocation. So we feel that there should be a pathway for us to still be able to protect the bay and get a little more waste load allocation and us treat to some lower nutrient levels.
Okay. One thing I would like to suggest is that we try to provide the short-term impacts and the long-term implications, because not everybody understands, the PFAS and nitrogen. I do to some extent. I have to dig into. But the bottom line comes to be if there's going to be a cost involved, if we're innovating, then we should be able to really understand what are the short-term and long-term implications of this, to really understand, okay, why are we doing this and why do we need to do it right now? Or if we're doing it in the future, why are we doing it?
I agree. And so there's so many different aspects with this, as you just mentioned. There's PFAS and there's microplastics. So one of the things we've been discussing is a way we can bring it in smaller bite-sized chunks, right? So maybe, an industry minute comes with a board meeting where we can talk about one new aspect and bring it to you over time in smaller pieces, because it is, like it was this summer, it was a lot to go through when we look at all the challenges that Broad Run has. So we're considering bringing key aspects forward as they come up.
Thank you. There's a lot of depth and breadth, and I truly am grateful for you to provide that. Good job on that. Thank you.
Roddy, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I was just going to add that that was the one of the primary objectives of the workshop this summer, was to begin to tell this story. And as Kendra is just mentioning, I think our goal was to continue to Because this is a very complex set of circumstances that we're dealing with. And to bring you all along for the ride, we need to continue to provide updates and keep you up to date on how things are progressing. So thanks.
Right. Thank you, Rodney. And yeah, as I mentioned earlier, providing updates, but it's always it comes down to the why, and really getting a grounded understanding of why we are doing this. And if we're doing this, what are the short-term and long-term implications? Because then we can sort of create that mental mindset, that framework of, where cost is involved, and then we take it from there. Because, one of our key elements on this board is to approve, projects but in order to understand all that, we need to really understand why we're doing and what we are doing and for whatever reason. So thank you. And good to see you, Rodney.
Mr. Moody, did you have a comment?
Yes. Hi, Kendra. Just wanted to ask you mentioned machine learning. I was just curious with that, what are some of the other technology innovations? Are you looking at big data marts? Just trying to understand, because with machine learning, there's a whole spectrum of other technology considerations. I'm just curious, where is it headed? Or even robotic process automation to analyze the data and incorporate with artificial intelligence. I'm just trying to understand what's the overall, if you had some sense of direction you could provide above machine learning.
Absolutely. And you really hit on it with automation. So Broad Run is a highly automated facility as it is. But what we've been bringing online, even within the last year internally, is more online nutrient analysis so that we can get instant feedback on what are phosphorus concentrations. So we're also putting in ammonia analyzers so that we can get a better idea of online, because historically we've been relying on the lab data, which takes 2 to 3 days. So you're exactly right. We want to start these machine learning algorithms. We want to get our online analyzers where they're dependable and everybody trusts them, so that we can start bringing those together and getting more predictive adjustments instead of saying, our effluent has moved, now let's adjust the dosing concentration. We can predictively move that. So we'll continue to be an automated facility, but we want to get more advanced in how those controls are used directly for operations, predicting where we can go so that we can make some advanced movements. And then also, I would say, tying in weather impacts, right? So when I was mentioning managing the PI and being able to say wet weather is predicted, so let's start making adjustments in the plant, movements to open up some EQ so that we can better strategize how to use that. So tying in wet weather analysis is another key aspect.
Okay, but with all those plans in terms of predictive analytics, I would assume there's quite a bit of changes to the data structure and your data repository environment. Are there plans for data marts, big data? Just curious if you had some thoughts or you're already there, or just kind of get a sense of what's going on. Because that's
absolutely
what you're talking about is a major impact on the data and how you structure your data. So I'm just curious.
It is. And so I believe Mike Beardsley is online, but our IT department has already been working on plans to make those movements on how do we better get our SCADA data tied in so that we can access it in these other models. So through those efforts that they've been going to take our financial and operational data and bring them together, that's what's going to allow us to make that next step and start utilizing it with these more advanced machine algorithms. So the fact that they had already started that in advance of us needing this was extremely timely. But again, we will be taking baby steps in this. So we're also approaching it in this first task of, okay, let's look at 3 modules, because it's exciting and we could say, oh, there's 15 things in the plant we could try this on. We're going to start with 3 in task A, our 3 most important, really set those up, learn from them, and then build from there, which is another benefit of starting now rather than starting like when we need it online.
Okay. And when you say those 3, is that more from a pilot perspective or a proof of concept perspective? What?
Exactly. Proof of concept, getting it set up, making sure that everything can talk to each other, And also, once operations start using it, they'll know better what to ask for. So from that perspective, and allowing them to see what it can do and know where we want to go next.
Okay, all right, thank you, Kendra.
Okay, I'm gonna go back and switch gears a little bit. So with all of the details that Kendra just shared, and realizing that we needed to advance this project, it was about 8 months ago when we put out a solicitation, an RFP, a request for proposals for interested parties. At the end of March, we received 2 proposals for professional service people interested in being our engineer for this project, and a selection committee of about 7 people. So that had folks from operations and maintenance, engineering, the general manager's office, and also from procurement supporting us. We made the determination based on similar criteria that Savita had laid out to interview both firms. So back in June, the committee made a selection, and since then, the committee's been negotiating a scope and fee and details for this project. So we're here today, we're recommending award of a professional services contract to Hazen and Sawyer. Got a CIP project snapshot here. So I think the important takeaway is that the phase 3 expansion is something that is in our CIP. It's something that we've been planning for. As we've identified some of the challenges that Kendra was talking about, and we talked a lot about adaptive planning in our wastewater workshop. This is something that we continue to revise and update based on available information as we learn new things. At this point, we're thinking that the phase 3 construction cost is in the $250 to $300 million range. For the planning efforts, we had budgeted about $1.5 million, and that excluded some of these advanced analytics and the tools that Kendra was just talking about. So this presents a fee breakdown for this project. So the total planning services, traditional planning services, sits at about $1.57 million. And then we've got some additional costs for these tools that are really going to bring us certainty in the technology selection component of this planning effort. So the total fee is $1.88 million. Similar to on the quarry project, we're going to bring you a budget summary on a regular basis. So since we're just starting out with this, we've got the cost reflected there. The total project budget number that's shown on the bottom line is actually the 2021 CIP number. That's got the full construction cost that was budgeted in 2021 plus design and planning. Obviously, we're going to be making some adjustments as we continue to learn more and move through the planning phase. There are some major elements that impact total cost. The increment of expansion, whether that be 5, 10, 15 MGD, is obviously going to have a significant impact on cost, as well as the technology that we are selecting. Kendra shared that this is not a short process. So what we're embarking on now in the phase 3 project is about a 2-year planning process, moving into a design, followed by a long construction timeframe. So I foresee opportunities to break out something, an early work package of some form, design and construction that will help us prior to full completion of a project in the 2031 timeframe. I think it's important to remember that this project is going to run parallel path to the phase 2 project. So we have ongoing construction at Broad Run right now to expand the capacity to 16.5 MGD.
Ms. Sursakar has a question.
Yeah, I'm still trying to understand why it's going to take 2 years for the planning process. And I'm pretty sure I didn't pick that up. I tried to, but can you provide some insight on that?
Yeah, so with the full level of effort, right? So there's The initial part of defining boundary conditions, flow projections, the large group of people that are involved in supporting the planning phases and ultimately making some pretty large decisions. When we lay that out, we feel like it is close to the 2-year mark. We've got a number of workshops, documentation, and development of these tools. So the process that Kendra was just talking about with the machine learning in itself, there's large amounts of data to compile, to manipulate, and to establish tools. There's also unit process evaluations for every process on the plant site, as well as evaluation of a whole host of new technologies that are being considered on both the liquids and solids side. The body of work is really significant, I guess, is the major takeaway.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for providing that insight.
So what I have here, if there aren't any other questions, is a recommended motion.
I'd like to make the motion to move this to the action agenda. Do we get a second?
I'll second it.
Yes, this
Jim
is
Bonfield.
Angeline. I will second that. Thank you.
I'd also like to make the comment that this is a very impressive presentation of a complex subject. Very well done. Julie, roll call?
Yes, sir. Seeing no other questions, Mr. Sultan,
Yes.
Mr. Bonfils,
Yes.
Mr. Moody,
Yes.
and Ms. Sursakar.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, consent or action, sir?
Action.
Thank you.
Are there any questions on the charts? I have one question. It seems to me that we're moving away from the projected chart. Is there any reason for that we seem to be diverging?
The reforecast that was done at the middle of the year is the dashed line, and then
Right.
there's the original beginning of the year forecast. So right now we're tracking along with the middle of the, with the reforecast that was done at bid year. And last month we talked a little bit about the reasons why there was a reforecast and the differences between the reforecast and the original one. I don't have that at the moment on hand, but I can reshare sort of from last month's presentation what the reasons were for the variance between the mid-year reforecast and the original forecast, if that would be helpful, and we could review it.
We could review it. You know what? Let's review it at the board meeting.
Okay, that'd be great.
Yeah. Any other questions?
None at this time.
I guess that's the last item on the agenda, Jewel.
Yes, sir, that's it. Now we're at the adjourn meeting agenda item.
Okay. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
This is Angeline. I'll second that.
That was
Okay.
a motion, so we need a second.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah, this is Keith. I'll second.
Okay.
Thank you.
Jewel, roll call?
Yes, sir, Mr. Sultan,
Yes.
Mr. Bonfils,
Yes.
Mr. Moody,
Yes.
and Ms. Sursakar.
Yes.
Adjourned at 9:09 a.m. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
All right. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.